is called the matriarch of the family from Sicily, was still alive. So she was there burying her son.
Yeah.
And I had never seen or heard anything, like that, Italian expressions of grief. It was really incredible, wailing.
A little different than the way the Irish do it.
Oh,
huh?
yes, very different. But
Yeah.
she could hardly stand up. She had to be helped out of the church. And I remember that,
Yeah.
touched my heart amazingly. The other memory I have while I'm on that happy topic of funerals, having been an altar boy at so many of them, there was a famous fire, I think it was Morrison or Morrissey over in the Granite Street area. The house burned down and most of the family was burned to death. I think the mother and the father and 2 kids.
I heard of that one in another story. Yeah, another interview.
And I remember they were buried from St. John's, and there was just a line of 4 caskets down the aisle, and they were not the polished, pretty, shiny mahogany caskets with gold handles and everything. They were just these kind of metal-looking boxes that reminded me of tin cans, or kind of a gray, zinky kind of color. And but that was certainly a traumatic event in the town at the time, and that was the impact it made on me personally,
Wow.
seeing those. And the children's caskets were only half the size of the grown-up ones, and that was like, oh, it's
Wow. Wow.
it's
You remember
really
it very well.
striking.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any other stories you can bring to mind?
Nothing.
No? Okay.
I bet. Another thing I'd like to comment about, though,
Go for
is home delivery. That's a big difference between then and now, in a certain sense. It was part of the lifestyle, I think, in those days. Tom Terry delivered coal and milk to people's houses. Dr. Place would make house calls, and Dr. Joe, in his early days, I think, made house calls. I remember, for chicken pox, mumps, and contagious diseases. And
Annunziata? Is
yeah.
that the, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody called him Doc Joe.
Yeah, yeah. I think we have his doctor bag here.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. I remember the doctor bag.
Yeah.
But he'd carry that in the house, and one of us had scarlet fever, so he put up the little red square, and we were quarantined.
Wow.
For maybe a week or so. But Cushman's Bakery delivered bakery goods, and maybe the Hood milk. There was a Hood milkman. There was a Tom Terry delivered milk. Johnny McDonough had a grocery store. He would come in on Mondays and sit down and talk with Helen, my mother, and chit-chat back and forth, and he'd take the grocery order, and he'd bring it back Tuesday or Wednesday. And that was one of my memories growing up, being poor. He did run a tab for us. I don't think the stores downtown did so much, but and I remember one day opening my mother's sewing machine drawer, and there was a stack of unpaid grocery bills.
Oh.
So I try not to get into that. But yeah, the doctors made house calls. As I say, the grocery, the milk, everything. What came to your, there was a guy named Harry, I think was his name. He would drive through town in a truck slowly, like 10 miles an hour. Cash paid for rags, cash paid for rags. And that's what he was, buying up rags
Yeah.
for whatever purpose.
Yeah.
So that was home delivery in those days.
Yeah. So what do you coming back for the 300th and for your reunion? What do you when you look around the town? Maybe this will be a way we can kind of.
Well,
what are you thinking when you see the development and the change, physical change to the buildings in the town?
Well, I was sorry to see that they had bulldozed Brown and Smith.
Mm-hmm.
I had been a paper boy and had a little paper route over the summers, that was, my brother worked there behind the counter, But I suppose some
So
of
that was the building that later became Bill's Pizza, am I right? Is that?
well, if you're looking at the town hall, it's immediately to the right.
Yeah, that's, yeah,
Brown
and
and
they
Smith.
replaced, that became, yeah, it was
Yeah,
Bill's, and
right.
Bill, they knocked it down and put
Yeah,
up.
I took a look at it a couple of days ago, and I realized for the first time that no, they hadn't simply redecorated the front, they had
Right,
redone the whole thing from top to bottom. Several years back, I walked down Grove Street, and I noticed the houses, of course, all seemed smaller than I remember them, and the yard seemed smaller. Everything looked prettier, freshly painted, neat, much neater than it used to be. And it wasn't until a couple of years after that that I said, all the chestnut trees were
yeah,
gone.
yeah.
Grove Street at one time had a double line on each side of gigantic old chestnut trees. And
There are a couple left.
there are some.
Yeah, there are a couple. I planted one in my street,
good.
you know, because
Yeah.
yeah.
Someone told me you lived on Pleasant Street.
I do, and I
Right.
planted one in front of my house, yeah.
The original immigrant ancestor, John, lived on Pleasant Street. I think it's 22. So the next time you go by there,
Make a note,
it's on
yeah.
the left going up.
But what about the house you grew up in? Is that,
That I grew up in.
Yeah, on
Yeah,
Grove.
it's still there.
It's still there?
And not too much change from when we left. I hope they repaired the roof and things like that. They probably updated the heating system because we burned coal.
so
at
you
the
said
time.
near Price, well,
Yes.
yeah,
38 Grove. We lived right next door to the Carrigan farmhouse, homestead, as it were. There was a barn, but it had been a cow barn. Because Grove Street, as you probably know, is a slightly more modern street. It was added in after, say, Pleasant and Hayden Road. So
it was a grove, that's
Yeah.
what it was, it was
I
a
don't
pine
know, I
grove.
haven't been down in the Grove, but,
Yeah.
you know, that was a great source of play, because there were no houses there. Of course, the baseball park hadn't been built down there, Carrigan Park, but, you know, there were brooks down there, and
Yeah,
we would
a
build.
lot of brooks, yeah.
Float boats there, and we could make fortresses and trails, and that went all the way over to Pleasant Street. And there weren't any, I think there are a couple of houses up up by Maple Street now, but, yeah, and there were lots and lots of wild blackberry bushes, and.
Yeah, I still have them running up my driveway.
And well, people were into canning, of course, and, you know, we had a cellar full of canned tomatoes and canned blackberries, and, you know, and a garden, of course. People were much more into that.
Well, it's coming back,
Yeah.
it's
well,
coming back, yeah.
That's good.
yeah.
But let me tell you about what we did, why we liked the chestnut trees so much, because of course, we collected them first of all, and it was always a game as to see who would get the biggest collection, amount of chestnuts. And then we'd have chestnut wars, and throw them at each other. But then when the leaves came down, we could burn leaves, it was open burning, and it was a great smell of the leaves burning. And before we burned them, however, we'd make big piles and jump in them. And we'd put the leaves together. You'd stick the stem of one leaf into the leaf of another one, and you could make chains.
Wow.
And crowns and necklaces and bracelets and all kinds of silly stuff. But yeah, so I was upset when I realized that
But the chestnut trees.
the chestnut trees had gone. And
That's
But
interesting. Yeah, you know, we could look at some old photos and, you
Yeah.
know, when it was disease that got them, or? you know.
I think it was, but I don't know that
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. I'm sure someone knows, yeah.
And I don't
They
know
should
what's.
replant them. Replant, you know, line the
Yeah,
streets, yeah.
well,
There are a couple left, though, I've noticed, some
yes,
big
yeah,
ones, yeah.
But at the time, it was
Yeah,
solid and shady all the way, just about down to Maine.
yeah,
But certainly up where I lived.
Yeah.
And the Carrigan house was the older farmhouse there. I think that had been surrounded by land at one time, for cows, apparently. But, and then in the Grove, we would know, you know, where the best birch trees were to climb up and swing. So we'd do that a great deal too. So.
well, it sounds like a terrific childhood,
Yeah. Well, and one final thought maybe is, with so many kids from so many different families and groups forming and all the time and playing and running around, we never had the sense that this is our property and we had to stay on it. Two kind of quick cross-cultural comparisons. Anthropologists have studied French culture. I taught French. It's a thing in French culture, the mother will take the kid to the park and there's an imaginary line, a barrier, a fence. Her kid is not supposed to go outside that area, and there'll be a mother on the bench next to her, and her kid is supposed to stay in her area. And you're not supposed to cross into another person's space, as it were. Well, the space in Hopkins was wide open
Anybody
for
could
us
go anywhere.
kids.
Yeah.
We weren't rampaging or anything, but you know, in the winter we would go over to Ash Street and Billy Thomas's house, and all the kids would slide down the driveway because it was a steep one. But at night we would be running around in everybody else's yards, and we'd go down to Harold Rathburn's and we'd take grapes off of his grapevines, and there were no stay in your own yard approach to things, and the people didn't seem to mind. Every now and then there'd be
Somebody was crabby.
yeah, there was a crabby person. I won't say who because Hal and Diana Ware would get mad at me. But yeah, so some people didn't want us in their yards, and they let us know. But for the most part, it was
Yeah.
you know, didn't seem to matter. And it was the same thing with the houses. We would go away and not lock the doors.
Yeah. And you'd been in, and you know the inside of all your neighbors' houses, right? Now I don't know I don't know my neighbors, and I don't know what their houses look like. I mean, I know some, but I don't know what every house looks like on the inside.
We would go in, you know, the Kursankowskis, and if Rita was making cookies for her 9, we'd get a cookie too.
Yeah.
And we walked in, and it wasn't a lot of knocking and everything.
Yeah.
The other cross-cultural comparison I wanted to quickly mention is not so much a different culture, but my kids grew up in State College, Pennsylvania, and they started first grade at the Fairmont School. And by the time Anne, my younger daughter, reached 5th grade, there was only one person in that school that she had started with in first grade.
Yeah.
And
It's moving.
you know, it's so different. I can come back to Hopkins, visit with the class of '59, and about half of them still living here, and some will come for the reunions, and it's just, that gets back to that stability thing I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
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 So.
Yeah. Well, that was terrific. Terrific to talk to you. Makes me a little sad thinking that that's something that's been lost in this town, and I'm sure it's in common with other towns everywhere, you know. But you did a really nice job describing it. Life here.
Well, thank you.
You know?
I was kind of thrilled to do this.
Oh, that's great. That's terrific. Now, I'm sure when I shut this off, you're going to have another great story, because that seems to be something that happens. But
no, I think I'll go out and have a cup of coffee.
All right. So thank you to Michael Danahy to come and talk to us today on September 14th, 2015. Just this was the weekend of the 300th anniversary of the town of Hopkinton, and how many years reunion for class of 59?
Class of 59.
Yeah, okay. And how many years was that? I can't.
How many years ago?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, 57 maybe?
Yeah.
56.
Yeah, okay.
56 years ago I graduated,
Yeah, well, it's terrific. So thank you very much, Michael.
Oh, my pleasure,
All right.
believe me.
Yeah.